Thank all of you for taking time to be here. Those from the media, those from our education establishment, interested citizens, concerned stakeholders of the education environment here in Utah, we welcome you all here today. As some of you recall, on July 17th of this year, some of you were there, I raised the issue of concern of some of the argument and dissension that was occurring in our education in the state of Utah, mainly that was revolved around what we call the Common Core standards. It was becoming very divisive and I think unhealthy. Clearly we were losing time and money and resources and really kind of dividing ourselves in ways that I think was not good for the state of Utah, certainly not good for the education of our students. So in trying to decide what to do, I thought we need to find out what Common Core and those standards are, truthfully, and what is it not. Sometimes we have people making statements of what it is and it is not. So those two issues, and really the ultimate is, and what do we want our educational standards to be going forward? Something that we can all feel good and comfortable about is having I think a cohesive effort as far as educational efforts in the state of Utah, and we need to bring people together. In doing that, I discussed three basic principles that should guide us in our work to, in fact, resolve this debate. And one was we need to maintain high academic standards in all subjects for all of our students. We're going to be talking about just a couple today because that's what was talked about in the Common Core, but for all of us in education that are concerned about it, it's really all of our subjects should be high. And all of our students should have the opportunity to be the best they can be and have some aspirational goal of succeeding and having more rigor in our schools. Second, we must monitor and limit the federal government's involvement and their role in our educational system. And we need to understand what that is, and as per the culture of Utah, we would like to have a limitation of government's role, certainly the federal government's role in our educational system. And three, we must, in fact, preserve state and local school districts' control of our education system, which would include not only our standards, but our curriculum, our materials, our acquisition of textbooks, our testing. Certainly we're going to have a review of data collection and what is appropriate to collect data from our students and who protects that data. And which, again, people on all sides of this issue seem to agree to. Those are things that we all say we want, desire, and so the question is, do we have it? And what do we have? And let's have that discussion, and let's find out what the truth is. And as I said to our review panel yesterday, I can handle the truth. I want the truth, and I can handle the truth, as I know the people of Utah can do so also, and want and desire the truth. So in regards to that, I'm here to report today on two actions that have taken place. One, yesterday, I held the first meeting of the Standards Review Panel. That's a panel that is co-chaired by Dr. Rich Kendall and President Matt Holland of Utah Valley University, with experts in math, with experts in language arts and reading as part of their subcommittees or working groups, parents and teachers and business people to take a look and review our standards and make sure that these standards are what we want to have in Utah, standards that we not only approve of, but standards that we believe will help make us college and career ready, giving our students the best chance they can to compete in what is now a global economy, and not only compete, but to win in that competition. And again, we're encouraging, as you all know, with our goal of 66 by 2020, to have people go on beyond high school into some kind of post-high school education, whether that be vocational training, certificates, associate degrees, two-year degrees, or full degrees. And if we do that, I think our future is very bright, certainly economically, as well as our quality of life. So I appreciate the fact that group is meeting, and I expect that by over the next 2 to 3 months, we'll have a complete review and recommendations coming back from that panel to our state school board to tell them what they've found in this independent review of what they think are good about the standards, what they think should be improved, modified, eliminated, or added to. And we won't presuppose what that's going to be, but they're going to take a thorough independent review of our Utah standards that we have currently in place today. The second, which is I think is significantly of significant importance, deals with monitoring and limiting the federal government's role in education. And to that end, I've asked our great Attorney General, Sean Reyes, and his staff to do a legal analysis, to do a review of the Common Core and our involvement in Common Core from its inception, and determine once and for all, again, what the truth is. Are we as a state really in control of our standards? Are we in our local and school districts and our charter schools, are we in control of the curriculum? And find out what the truth of that situation is. So again, it's a matter of reviewing, seeing what the legal entanglement is. Have we somehow ceded or given up control to the federal government, whether it's inadvertently or intentionally? Again, I'm not weighing in on this. That's why I've asked the Attorney General and their legal team to take a review of that legal analysis and tell us, what do you find? What do we find out the facts of the matter are to be? So I've asked the Attorney General to examine 5 specific issues. They are: 1, does the State Board of Education have authority to set academic standards for Utah students, and was Utah's adoption of the Common Core standards illegal in any way? 2, do our charter schools and districts still control their curriculum? 3, have we as a state ceded any control over our education standards or curriculum to the federal government? 4, can we change our academic standards, including modifications to the Common Core standards? Are there conditions or restraints on our ability to make those changes? And the 5th issue, is our waiver from No Child Left Behind in compliance with state law, specifically Senate Bill 287? Those are the issues before us and what brings us together here today. And so with that, I'm going to invite the Attorney General, Sean Reyes, to come forward and answer those questions and make whatever presentation he'd like to. I know he's got his assistant Parker Douglas here with him, and so Sean, we'll turn the time to you.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate that. You might want to take a seat. This may be longer and more boring than you anticipated. I appreciate the Governor's reference to the movie A Few Good Men. That was a good movie with some good lawyering. And as a good lawyer, I think I need to set forth some caveats for you. So let me go ahead and do that. First of all, I apologize if I lose my voice. I've been sick and trying to battle a cold for the last week and a half, and I have lost my voice on a few occasions. So I apologize if I do, bear with me. The scope of what we were asked to look at, there were very specific questions that the Governor's office sent to us. We have not looked at every single legal question dealing with every single aspect of what we know as Common Core. So I wanted everyone to understand that we put some of our best resources, some of our brightest lawyers into looking at the issues that the Governor gave us. I think it's fairly comprehensive and it addresses significant issues, but it is not the final word on every aspect of Common Core. We do also have pending litigation with regard to the validity of Common Core, and as the attorneys on behalf of the state, I don't want to get too much into detail about the case or the details of that case, but I might be alluding to some of the concepts that are addressed therein. Lastly, as I mentioned to the Governor, this may be longer and more boring than you had anticipated yourselves. If any of you had ambitions to go to law school and didn't get the chance to go to, and harbored any romantic notions of how interesting law school might be, I might be disabusing you today of any of those notions. I'll try to keep it brief, and so you understand that we've provided to the Governor our entire research. It is not an official Attorney General opinion letter. Those have existed historically but haven't been our practice in my administration. It is, however, our legal advice to the governor, and my understanding is the governor will make those available immediately to the media and the public if they aren't already available currently. So you will get in much more detail the breadth of the legal analysis, which I am trying to again summarize for you. Brevity is difficult at times for attorneys. The first series of questions that the governor's office posed to us was the first series of questions. Does the State Board of Education have authority to set academic standards for Utah students? The quick answer to that is yes. And specifically, Utah Code Annotated Section 53A14021C4 provides the State Board of Education shall establish rules and minimum standards for public schools for curriculum and instruction requirements. The second of the first series of questions was the State Board's adoption of the Common Core standards, quote, illegal, unquote, in any way? Our short answer is we're still litigating that right now. We don't believe that there was illegal conduct in the adoption of Common Core standards, as has been alleged. Again, we need to be circumspect on this. It's the subject of pending lawsuit. The State Board of Education, in support of this conclusion, we believe has the authority to establish core standards. And what we can say with certainty is that our reading of the facts and relevant Utah statutes leads us to the conclusion that the board set standards, it did not promulgate rules, and the law makes a distinction between the two, and the setting of those standards was appropriate. Secondly, and importantly, the core standards were adopted in a public process. Utah Code Annotated Section 53A140.2.61 requires the board to consult with local school boards, school superintendents, teachers, employers, and parents in implementing core curriculum standards. During 2009 and 2010, significant outreach occurred with local education agencies, LEAs, Utah's legislature, interim education committee, and the public. So all of these stakeholders were involved in the process. Public meetings discussing the proposed core standards were held with superintendents, charter school directors, curriculum directors, legislators, PTA members, higher education representatives, business leaders, and other members of the public, all supporting our conclusion that the rules, that the standards, not rules, were adopted properly. The second series of questions that the governor's office posed to us starts with this question: by the adoption of Common Core standards, has Utah ceded authority over standards and curriculum? Our short answer is no. By its adoption of Utah Core standards, Utah has not ceded authority over standards or curriculum. The core standards, which are Utah's adoption of Common Core standards, apply to standards and not curriculum. So as a preliminary matter and to distinguish the two, they do not apply to curriculum. Furthermore, Utah has the option under its ESEA waiver to repeal the Common Core standards and adopt college and career-ready standards approved by Utah's higher education institutions and the state school board. If Utah were to repeal its Common Core standards, new standards approved by Utah's higher education institutions would have to be adopted by the board in order to qualify for an ESEA waiver. Utah is not required to implement the Common Core standards. This process would take place in concert with Utah higher education authorities, not the federal government. And let me see if I'm trying to selectively narrow some of the important but voluminous information that I have been provided to me. Recently enacted Utah Code Annotated 53A140.2.8 requires the formation of a board, quote, standards review committee. This committee makes recommendations to the board concerning its adoption of core curriculum standards. Furthermore, the statute clearly provides that the board has the ultimate authority in establishing these core curriculum standards. Clearly, the statutory framework allows this second option and need not involve the federal government. Second question of the second series, do Utah charters or local school boards, LEAs, control their curriculum? Our answer, yes. Common Core impacts standards and not curriculum. Again, an important distinction to make. Utah Code 53A1402.65 expressly states that LEAs shall design their school programs that are supported by generally accepted scientific standards of evidence to focus on the core curriculum standards. Likewise, 402.66 of that same section provides that, quote, each school may select instructional materials and methods of teaching that it considers most appropriate to meet core curriculum standards. Further, No Child Left Behind prohibits the federal government to mandate, direct, or control a state or state school's curriculum or program of instruction. Likewise, NCLB prohibits federal funding to be used, quote, to endorse, approve, or sanction any curriculum designed to be used in a school, and finally instructs that no state shall be required to have academic content or student academic achievement standards approved or certified by the federal government in order to receive assistance. The last question of the second series, are there any partnerships or programs that have indirect control on the curriculum based on our research? The answer is no. Common Core standards were developed in concert with the National Association of State Governors and the Association of State Superintendents. Utah was an active participant in this Common Core process, which developed standards and not curriculum. Ladies and gentlemen, the good news is we are halfway there. The bad news is I need a Senator Rubio moment here for a second. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Just as a side note, I was helping a nice young couple that was making their way through the Capitol who were obviously lost. And when I was done pointing them in the right direction, they sheepishly turned back and said, Senator Rubio, thank you so much. Very kind of you to help us out. I don't know how they thought Florida, Utah, but only bested by when I was in the Salt Lake airport and was being helped. And when I was done, they said, Senator Cruz, we hope that you have a wonderful flight. So I trust me, I'm not angling for any higher positions or office, but third series of questions, and this is an important one, so I want to take some time to emphasize this definitionally and substantively. Are we as a state bound by any federal entanglements in regards to our academic standards, and what about curriculum? And not to sound too much like a lawyer, but often how questions are posed or how you define what the word is yields the result of the question or the answer to the question. And so if you define entanglements as working in conjunction with the federal government or having the benefit of a waiver of No Child Left Behind by having requirements that standards be college and career ready, then the answer to that question, are there federal entanglements, is yes. And that's if you define it that way. If you define federal entanglements as does the federal government have ultimate control over setting standards or curriculum for the state of Utah in lieu of the state, then the answer is no. Then there are no federal entanglements in that sense. Since 2012, the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, has issued Utah an ESEA waiver from No Child Left Behind requirements. In August of 2014, Utah requested a one-year ESEA waiver extension, which is currently being reviewed by the Department of Education, and my understanding is that we may have a very quick and positive response from the Department of Education. I don't want to steal any thunder from the governor, and so I'll leave it at that. One final fact and note I think is important, again, to underscore is that Utah adopted Utah core standards in August of 2010. It did not receive its first ESEA waiver until June of 2012. The second in this third set of questions is, did we, Utah, the state of Utah, receive federal monies to adopt Common Core standards? The answer by our review and research is no. The pertinent law under No Child Left Behind, Section 9527C1, provides that no state shall be required to have student academic achievement standards approved or certified by the federal government in order to receive assistance under this act. Given the statutory language, federal funding cannot be made contingent on adopting Common Core standards. At the current time, approximately $24 million or 30% of Utah's Title I funding will need to be set aside for the following specified statutory purposes. 1, for transportation costs, 2, for after-school tutoring, and 3, for professional development. Utah's No Child Left Behind non-compliance never jeopardized its Title I funds. Rather, Utah's No Child Left Behind non-compliance impacted only its flexibility in using these Title I funds. For me, the bottom line in the conclusion is the ESEA waiver preserved the LEA's flexibility in their Title I funding use by avoiding these set-asides of funds. The last question in number 3, which is the third of 4 pages, did we or the state of Utah acquiesce educational control, cede educational control, or state sovereignty by adopting Common Core standards? Our legal conclusion is no. In 2010, Utah's State Board of Education adopted the core standards pursuant to their powers under Utah's Constitution and statutory law. Furthermore, in its process of adopting these standards, the board conferred with the legislature's Education Committee, education stakeholders, and parents from across Utah. Since these standards were adopted 2 years before Utah obtained its 2012 ESEA waiver, there was no acquiescence of educational control or state sovereignty at the time of adoption. Fourth series and final, well, actually there's 2 here and then one quick one in the last subsection. First question, can we change our academic standards, including modifications to Common Core standards? And the answer is yes, we can. Utah Code 53A14021 authorizes the State Board of Education to establish minimum standards for the public schools. Since Utah's board has the authority to establish minimum standards, it also has authority to modify those standards. In fact, Utah has modified its Utah Core standards since their first adoption in August of 2010. However, Utah's legislature has placed some requirements necessary for modifying these standards. Second question of Series 4, what are the conditions or restraints on our ability to make changes, excuse me, to standards? In short, these core standards must comply with Utah's legislature's learning objectives, public outreach, standards review committee, and public notice requirements. Those are the only conditions limiting the setting and passing of standards. Utah law places a number of conditions on the State Board of Education when adopting or modifying these standards. There is no federal law or rule which limits Utah's ability to modify its core standards. Utah Code annotated 53A1 402.6 and 8 impose certain conditions on the school board when it's establishing or amending standards, including compliance with the legislature's learning objectives, consultation with education, business, and parent stakeholders, formation of standards review committee to make recommendations, and public notice comment period with hearing requirements as well. The last of the fourth series of questions, will we lose federal monies if we modify Common Core standards? Our legal conclusion is no. There is no federal restraint on Utah's ability to modify its core standards. And as I said before, under No Child Left Behind, you can't, the state shall be required to have academic achievement standards approved or certified by the federal government in order, no state shall have or be required to have such standards approved or certified by the federal government in order to receive assistance, so that they cannot be predicated on federal requirements. Last series of questions, and I'll just distill it down to one question. Can we confirm that our waiver from No Child Left Behind is also in compliance with our state law, specifically SB 287? Our conclusion is yes. As previously stated, Utah's ESEA waiver requires adoption of college and career-ready standards. If Utah repeals its current standards, it will be required to develop alternative standards approved by higher education institutions and adopted by the school board. Utah's failure to adopt alternative standards will result in potentially the loss of its ESEA waiver, and this loss could impact Utah's Title I schools. But again, our waiver is in compliance with our Constitution and our state laws. That concludes my not so brief summary of the governor's questions. I believe the governor has some closing remarks, and then we'll open it up for some question and answers. Given my voice and the presence of my chief of staff and federal solicitor who oversaw the research on this project, I will make him available to the public for questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean. And I know this was a tough assignment. There's a lot of issues and a lot of details to be reviewed and looked at, and it's a big issue for people throughout the state of Utah. And so I appreciate the good work of the Attorney General's office. I want to recognize Joel Coleman, our acting superintendent, school board, and Sid Dixon, our acting deputy superintendent. Tammy Pfeiffer, who is my education director, and I know you know the lieutenant governor. So there may be some questions for any and all of these people if you have any concerns. Bottom line for me is whatever the disputes are, we want to resolve them. And I think we can go where the truth is. If there's problems that are out there that are existing, we ought to fix them. But if they're not problems, we ought not to create a problem where none exists. We ought to find out what the truth is and see what we can do to work together to further the educational achievement and opportunities in our state. We want to have the best educational system that we can possibly have here in Utah. We know we owe it to our students, to our parents, and we're going to work together in this journey over the next 2 to 3 months to resolve any questions out there and hopefully ensure to everybody's satisfaction that Utah is in fact in control of its education from top to bottom. That we're not going to cede any of that responsibility to some outside interests. I don't care whether it's the federal government or the National Governors Association or Bill Gates. Utah is going to be in control of our educational system, and we'll work with anybody who's got concerns, issues, to resolve those issues so that there's some sense of agreement that we have, in fact, are in control of our education. So this is a first step. It's not the only step. We'll continue to work together over these next couple of months to help resolve this, what's become a contentious issue. So with that.